The world looks very different today because of the 50-year effort of Mike Pertschuk. It's a great pleasure for the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids tonight to introduce our champion, ladies and gentlemen, Mike Pertschuk.
Oh, right. Step over here. I don't want to lose my seat. Take your seat. Take yours because I don't want to read it again.
Don't worry.
Wow. Wow. Who was that horn-rimmed firebrand in that video? That was a wild guy. I'm deeply grateful for Matt's generous words and of course for many other things. No, I'm starting at the end of this. Just let's see. What I want to start out by just observing that 50 years ago, and 30 years ago, and even 15 years ago, the tobacco control movement was passionate but struggling. And I worked on some of the early laws, and the ugly truth is that no law passed, the first label warning, even the ban on advertising, that didn't fit the tobacco industry strategy. The data was overwhelming, the science was overwhelming. We had science so strongly on our side. But the tobacco industry was smart enough to adopt a strategy, and I called this strategy, give a decade to gain give an inch to gain a decade. And they gave up only what they wanted to give up. And that was really the state of the tobacco movement for most of my experience. And we made some minor, significant advances. But I'm really honored today because CT, Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, has essentially, with very strong partners, transformed the power of the tobacco control movement so that it matches and in fact even exceeds the power of the tobacco industry, along with science and along with public opinion. And with the strong support of the Cancer Society and others, it really has become a model of public interest advocacy to counteract the power of the corporate lobbies. And in this last 15 years, here in the United States, Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids has been a major part in the passage of the strongest federal law and the strongest state laws in so many states that the Constitution, as interpreted by this court, will allow. And that's an extraordinary achievement. In the 1980s and 1990s and early 2000s, I lose track of decades, I worked in South America, and I worked in Eastern Europe, and I worked in India to help develop tobacco control advocacy programs. And frankly, we thought it was hopeless. We thought it was hopeless. Everything was stacked against us in those countries, including the tobacco lobby unleashed. But with the support of Mike Bloomberg, Mayor Mike Bloomberg and Bill Gates, and with the Tobacco-Free Kids' central role, seminal role, in finding indigenous advocates, not trying to do it as Americans, but trying to find the right people and to help train them. They have really advanced the cause of tobacco control in some of the most addicted tobacco companies in the world. And that's an extraordinary achievement. I'm also delighted because of all the wonderful colleagues over 5 decades that are here have come. It's very touching. And if I were to call a roll, I'd use up the rest of my 6 minutes, which will probably take 8 anyway. And the rest of you would be bored. but they are wonderful colleagues, and it's a great joy to be joined with them again. I'm also tickled to join you among the other youth advocates. And in truth, I'm inspired by them, as we all should be. This is Tobacco Control's new generation. We gave you lessons from all the mistakes we made, and we made many. But you've given us passion, energy, and skills. You've given us realistic hope for the future. And that's an item that's in very low supply. On the other hand, while I'm deeply gratified with that marvelous video, although I still don't know who that guy was, it's a little one-sided. We were not exactly angelic in this work. At least sometimes our passion outran our good sense. And you could gather at least as many unflattering quotes about my work as the pleasant ones that you found for me. So I need to set the record straight. With a little help from my son Mark, who's here, the former president of the feisty Americans for Tobacco-Free Kids. About 2 years ago, I was sitting in my office and I had a call from Mark, and he said, "Are you sitting? This is not something you want to hear from an offspring." So I was sitting, and he said, "Read the email clip I sent you." They were political satirist Chris Buckley's author's notes to the director of the film based upon his book, Thank You for Smoking. And I'd like to share an excerpt with you. Chris Buckley, who is one of my favorite satirists, he's an equal opportunity satirist. Spin, he writes, is such a commonplace word that it's hard to remember where it first arrived on the scene. I did a little digging. Actually, now I'm spinning you. That's Chris, not me. All I did was Google spin, origins of, and within about 1.3 seconds, I was connected to a delightful website called WordSpy. According to WordSpy, the very first citation of the word spin occurred in an article in the Washington Post in 1977. This was a citation. What Pertschuk is accused of is being too ardent a consumer advocate, of lobbying members of the committee on behalf of things he thinks are good, of putting his own philosophical spin on options, of having excessive influence, in short, of acting like the 101st senator. That was acting. As the great folk singer Pete Seeger said when he got a great ovation for whistling, that's not exactly what I want to be known for. But Buckley wasn't through with me. His note continues. The name Pertschuk rang a distant bell. I re-Googled, and what do you know? He was the righteous, hall monitor-like head of the U.S. Federal Trade Commission. He was so insufferable, he was ultimately forced to resign. And what did he do then? He became a leader of the anti-smoking lobby. Full circle spin, still Buckley. Enjoy the movie. Turn off your cell phones. And as Mr. Pertschuk would say, no smoking. Buckley is not entirely right. He was not exactly forced to resign. The people elected Ronald Reagan president, and I had no choice. But it is certainly true that I managed to acquire a large host of sworn corporate enemies while at the Federal Trade Commission. They even succeeded in getting their friends in Congress to temporarily shut the FTC down until we stopped our effort to ban all advertising to children. Toward the end of my tenure at the FTC, I ran into an old friend in the streets of Washington. This is a true story. Who stopped me and said, "Mike, take heart. Remember the words of the great statesman, many enemies, much honor." I fell for this. I said, I like that. I like that. Who was it? He said, Mussolini. I much prefer tobacco-free kids. Thank you.